Bowie, we can be heroes. Yes, and we can be heroes. We can be heroic in different ways. I have with me in the studio two trainers who we're going to discuss nonviolence. And I must tell you, dear listeners, of something that happened to me and what brought me to nonviolent training. You know, I too had an idea of what nonviolence behavior meant, and I had an idea that it was maybe a little bit more passive than I sometimes like to be. But then I went to a training on Sunday, and I found out that there's different approaches that one can take that are under nonviolence, but yet they're still proactive. They're still doing something. And the reason why I even went to that training in the first place is one of my friends was like, yeah, you know, if you're going to come to the Women's March, you ought to come and learn about nonviolence and really hear about it. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, you know, I'm pretty busy, but if I can do it, I'll do it. And then what happened to me that drove me just, made me so angry. And you know, your Miss Vicky's a calm person. She's, you know, I'm happy, I'm lighthearted. But this made me so angry. I was seething. So I'm walking downtown near the university, minding my own business as I love to do, not bothering anybody, everything's fine. I had on a dress. This guy comes by. He's on a bike. And he reached his hand under my dress. And yes, this is a real thing that happened. He grabbed me in the front, and his hand, you know, as he's riding by, his hand rolls up to the back. So he flips my skirt up so that, you know, the whole world looking at my underpants. I didn't like that. And plus he had grabbed me, and he was laughing. He thought it was funny. He's like, ha. I was so angry, and I was feeling anything but nonviolent at that point. I was really super angry. The first thing I did is I looked around for a rock because I was going to throw it at him. I got a pretty good arm, and that's not a good thing to do, but that was my first feeling of how dare you. And he's, you know, riding off down the street, and he's looking behind me, and behind his shoulder, and he's laughing at me. And I was just, I was so angry, and I said, okay, me wanting to to throw a rock at somebody is really not a right thing to do. Maybe it might be a natural reaction, but it was wrong. And thank goodness there were no rocks around. It's a city sidewalk. It was, you know, there's nothing like that. But the thing is that made me think, wow, maybe I should go to this nonviolent training and just maybe, you know, get some good vibes from some, you know, nonviolent people, because that really, really bothered me. Plus, it made me think, wow, you know, I really need to go to this march too, because this guy, and I would say he looked to be, I don't know, I would say he was a 20-something. I'd say probably early to mid-20s. And the guy, he looked like he stepped out of a J. Crew commercial or something. He was clean cut. He's a regular guy. And, you know, not the person who you might think would do something like that. And I was just like, but you know what? Now we live in a world where that's okay, where that's cute, right? Because, you know, the head person in charge does things like that and doesn't apologize for it. So it's okay to just molest women in the street now? And I wasn't out at dark either. This was a daytime. And I was just the weirdest thing ever. And I was like, I can't imagine this happened. But that sent me right over to the training, because I said, you know what? I need to learn more about this. And I thought that you, dear listeners, would like to learn more about it too. And that's why I have invited these members of the newly formed Gandhi team here to share with us about nonviolence. We have with us today in the studio Joanna Thurmann and Stanley Taylor. Hello and welcome to you both.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, I'm so glad that you were able to be here, because I know this is a busy week for you all.
Yes, it is. We've been gearing up some trainings for that Women's March you've been talking about on the air with Jenny and Violet just a few minutes ago. So yeah, we had a lot of takers for that training, and it's been really exciting.
Good. Well, I was one of them, and I really enjoyed it. And I was like, this is so moving. And I was really amazed at my idea of nonviolence was just like, oh, you're just passive. But it's really not.
Yeah, those are actually very common misperceptions of what nonviolence is. Many people think it's being a doormat or turning the other cheek, or it's pacifism or passivity, but it's really about an active force. And that active force does transformation in us and in those that we are seeking to transform personally in interpersonal relationships and conflicts, but also as a platform for social change. And so it's really a very powerful way to look at active nonviolence and its success in achieving the goals we seek. And of course, those goals are peace and justice. So that's a wonderful thing.
And it really is wonderful. There's been times in my life when I've been faced with things, and when I would practice the nonviolent behavior, I would just pray for people. I would say, okay, I'm going to pray for you. And somebody can be insulting me right in my face or whatever. I've had that happen. Listeners, regular listeners know and have heard some of these anecdotes. And I just say, okay, I'm going to pray for you as calmly as possible. And sometimes that actually becomes almost passive aggressive. Not that I intended that way, but the recipient of that can feel, it amps it up rather than damps it down. I've found that it can make them even more angry. Like, oh, you think you're better than me? You're going to pray for me? Or that type of thing.
And in that case, you may not always want to tell them that you're doing it.
Yeah, just don't tell them, just do it.
But it's interesting you say that, because we have Gene Sharp, the man who's credited as the founder of what we call strategic nonviolence, categorized 198 tools of nonviolence, and prayer and vigils and marches are in that category of nonviolent protest and persuasion as a way of achieving ends. So really, being prayerful, having prayer vigils is definitely along those lines. But so are things like marches, which we're talking about here. Then moving on up the line, we have things like strikes and sit-ins and boycotts and those and civil disobedience eventually. Now that's not what the march is about.
No.
But yeah, prayer is definitely something that transforms us into an openness to be able to continue a dialogue, for example, and seek reconciliation.
I understand that. Stanley, you've been awful quiet over there, and I don't want to leave you out. Pull that mic right up there. and go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners, please.
I'm Stan Taylor, and I've been with a group called Pax Christi. That's the Catholic Peace and Nonviolence Movement for, at least 20 years. And when Joanna first started telling us about what she wanted to do, I had a friend, and you met him, Lauren Peters,
yes,
who taught nonviolence in a high school for 30 years and is currently over in Thailand teaching nonviolence in a Muslim institute, and he's teaching it to Muslims, Hindus, and Christians. So he's quite the expert on Gandhian nonviolence. And Gandhian nonviolence is what we call principled nonviolence. It's the form of nonviolence that seeks to change hearts and minds by always making sure that you treat the people that you think are your enemy as with respect and recognizing their dignity and that they hold some of the truth. But even though we do that, we also have a piece of the truth ourselves, and the one truth we know we have is that we are all interconnected, we're all one. And so that's the motivation behind principled nonviolence.
Oh, I see.
Now, exactly, it's something that we've tried to convey to folks about what nonviolence is as a platform, and some of its principles being that truth holding. A wonderful word I've come to love now is satyagraha, which means that we all hold the truth. No one holds it by themselves, no one holds it alone, but we all share in it. And to be able to find that, we often speak of in nonviolence as the two hands of nonviolence. One is raised up. That means there's certain things that we know are unjust, and certain things we know are untruth, and we hold that up to say, I know that this is what I will not stand for, or this is an injustice. That's a hand raised up. And the other hand is open and lowered, and it means I'm here to listen and to receive your truth. And so those two hands of nonviolence help us to continue a dialogue toward understanding and seeking peace and justice. So Stan mentioned really quickly how we got involved. I sort of jumped on the moving train of the Women's March. That's really what that felt like. This was a train that had left the station, and I was running behind it and saying, this is a whole bunch of women and men who were really impassioned, many of them first-time activists. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could bring the platform of nonviolence as something that everybody understands can actually achieve this change we seek for many of these issues people are coming out for, whether it's human rights or ecology, environmental protections, and so on. So when I got the team together of Stan here and Lauren and a few others that I had worked with in various other causes, we really pulled it together to be able to bring those trainings to a few hundred people across the Bay Area, because we coordinated also with Oakland and San Francisco.
Ah, I see. Sounds great. And again, you're a little bit quiet over there.
Well, I was going to make a comment because Joanna did mention turning the other cheek. That's that when people think that nonviolence is passive.
Yes.
Actually, that very act that was described in the Bible was a very good example of principled nonviolence. By turning the other cheek, the person is saying, I won't hurt you, but you will treat me as an equal.
Ah, I see.
And so it's a different interpretation, but that is really what Jesus was saying. He was saying, turn the other cheek, because a Roman soldier would hit you on the right cheek if you were an enemy, but they would slap someone they considered to be lower on the other cheek. So Jesus is saying, turn the other cheek. Tell them, you will treat me as an equal, but I am not going to hurt you.
I understand. So that's similar to the hands.
Exactly. Yeah. And what are, some beautiful concepts we've been able to get across to people. One other concept I quickly wanted to share was Gandhi, because we choose to talk about nonviolence through the life of Mahatma Gandhi. Really talked about a law of progression, which I've seen to be so true here in the Women's March. He believed that when you're doing something good and just, people will show up to help, often from unexpected places. So while he was working for Indian independence from British rule, the daughter of a British admiral came to help in his campaign, in his movement. So a phenomenal sort of turning of support. And I think here in the Women's March, Jenny and Violet mentioned so many women coming together, everybody reaching in their connections, and those connections being helpful. That's what we found.
And this is similar to what we just saw in Standing Rock. All of a sudden, people were turning up to help support the Native Americans, including the veterans. And the veterans actually changed that struggle.
Yes.
And caused the police to stop attacking them. That was an example of the law of progression.
There you go. We're going to take a short musical break, and we'll be right back with our guests. Up next, we have local artist. She's a hometown girl here from Santa Clara, Jessica Johnson with Love is Real. Keep it here at KKUP 91.5, listener-supported radio.